is much in the news these days, usually for the wrong reasons. Not mentioning ACC, except I'm mentioning ACC. We've had more media inquiries over that probably than we've had on any other topic ever. It makes it sound as if privacy's, it's easy to get it wrong. I suppose it is in some ways, it's easy to get it wrong, but it's also, and this is my message for today, really quite easy to get it right. What I'd like you to do, I know privacy's come up a few times over the last couple of days, and I haven't managed to be here because of other work commitments. So what I'd like you to do is chip in with your questions as we go through. Don't wait for the end. Just stick your hands in the air. Yell if I don't see you. Thank you very much, Shweta. Because I might not see the hand go up, so just shout out. What I'd like to do today is sort of give you a few tips on getting it right before you get it wrong. ACC is the easy candidate to pick on at the moment, but you know it's not so long ago that we had the Sony PlayStation hack. It's not so long ago that we had Google collecting information that it didn't particularly want to collect, or it said it didn't want to collect through the Wi-Fi, the Street View Wi-Fi, and got into major trouble. So you know if the big organisations, the big companies can do it, you know how does a small to medium enterprise in New Zealand possibly cope with the challenges? Well, I've got a few tips for you. Tell me if you think they work or don't work. I'll use cartoons because we have a pet, if not a tame cartoonist in Chris Slane, who does the most wonderful privacy cartoons. Personal information, it's everywhere. It's obviously, it's a huge asset for any business. It doesn't matter whether it's your staff information, whether it's your client information, whether you're pulling information about people from the web. Personal information is an asset, and what I'm suggesting to you is that you need to treat it like an asset. Because if you fail to treat it like an asset and you get it wrong, the trust in your brand is going to completely plummet. You may think, with some justification, you would think, looking what people post on social media, for example, not just the youngsters, but everybody. Look at what they post on social media. You could be forgiven for thinking people don't care about their privacy. They put up their phone numbers. They put up details of their sexual lives. They put up everything. And most of it's on Twitter, and we don't care, all right? I don't mind what people ate for breakfast. But at the same time, they say to us, they may behave in that way, but they say to us, and not only to us, on every survey that's going, people say, no, we care about our privacy. We put the information up for a whole variety of reasons, because that's what seemed to be normal. That's what people do. We give our information up to be able to get the chocolate fish, or to be able to sort of click through to the competition. Yes, we do that, but we care at the same time. Now, those two statements may seem as if they don't sit together. There's some research coming through that indicates that actually they do. It's possible to care but behave without a particular eye to the long-term consequences at the same time. And we're dealing a lot with students. I was talking to a group of 13-year-olds, for example, at a school in Wellington last week. They were just awesome. When I said, well, why do you do such and such online? Why do you post information about, what information do you post about other people online, and why do you do it? This was a group predominantly of 13-year-old girls. The answer was revenge. And they're not thinking because they're not wired for consequences. So it's not really very surprising. Before we start talking about privacy, one of the key questions that people ask me is, okay, so what is privacy? You know, when am I in a state when I need to start to think about privacy? And the answer is any time that you're dealing with personal information. Okay, fine. What is personal information? Personal information is information about a living human being who is identifiable in some way. The information needs to be capable of identifying the person. So if all you're doing is dealing with stats, analytics, that isn't capable of identifying the person, don't leave the room because there's a bottle of wine on the table, so you may just want to stick around, but if you want to go to sleep, that's just fine. Okay, because you might not need to listen to me. If you're not dealing with personal information, this presentation really probably isn't that helpful for you. But as I say, a lot of the time, what you are dealing with is information about people. You're wanting to talk to people, you're wanting to reach people, you want to know what they think. How do you handle that information? So as long as you've got information that's capable of identifying a person, even if it doesn't identify them by name. If you can link that with them, then that's personal information, and it's governed by the New Zealand Privacy Act if you're operating in New Zealand. It's a common misconception that to be covered by the Privacy Act or to have anything to do with privacy, the information needs to be secret in some way, or it needs to be sensitive in some way. That's not the case. It's any information about people. If it's not secret, if it's not sensitive, you don't have to take as much care with how you secure it. You may not need to, if it's on a publicly available site, you can collect it, you can use it, you can disclose it. I'm going to suggest you may need to be careful with it for other reasons, but there's a lot of latitude with what you can do with it, and the Act will give you that latitude. I promise not to get too lawyerly in here. But the information doesn't need to be secret or sensitive before it's actually governed by the Privacy Act. It's just the rules are slightly different about how you deal with it. And who has to comply? Who's actually governed by the Privacy Act? What type of organisations? Everybody. Doesn't matter whether you're a one-person business, whether you're a global multinational corporation, whether you're a government agency of however big or small, whether you're an individual person, whether you're a club, an NGO, a church, you have to comply with the Privacy Act. And that's why the Act is built the way that it is, with a set of 12 very, very broad, flexible principles that basically say how you handle personal information. It doesn't try to get down to nitty-gritty rules about what you do. Because if it tried to do that, if it tried to get too technology-specific or agency-specific, it just wouldn't work. It has to be capable. What it is sets the guidelines, sets the ground rules for how you operate. And then a lot of where you go from there as a business is down to developing good policies, understanding your business, knowing what it is that you need, and I'm going to give you some tips, hopefully, that will help you get that right. At base, what the Privacy Act makes you do is to think about what you're doing with personal information. It doesn't give you a template exactly to work through, but it does make you think about what you're doing with personal information throughout its life cycle, so from woe to go. I'm going to suggest, somewhat controversially, except I have been a privacy geek for 20 years and I have found this to be true on the ground, that predominantly the Privacy Act has common sense rules about how to operate. I know one person's common sense is not necessarily the same as another person's common sense, but generally, if you've got an eye to your customers, if you know what it is that they think, if you know what it is that they worry about, if you can pick accurately how people are going to react, you're actually going to be doing the right thing most of the time. You might not know it. You might not be scrutinising the legislation every 5 minutes to check that you're within the boundaries of your legal compliance, but pretty much you're going to be doing the right thing. Because what the Privacy Act does is it operates the way that we operate, the kind of rules that society tends to set for itself. So I can get information about you, but no surprises. I'll let you know what I'm going to do with it, how I'm going to use it, who I'm going to give it to. No surprises. Everybody's sweet. Everybody's on the same page. Use whatever metaphor you like. It tends to work. There's a lot of writing on this slide, which I'm sorry about. But basically, I've paraphrased horribly what the privacy principles actually say. But this is what it boils down to. Only get the information you need. Get it directly from people themselves, if you can. If it's publicly available information, that's fine as well. But the general rule is get it directly from people and tell them what you are doing. I suppose my main tip for today, Jennifer mentioned earlier, don't piss people off. I would say, my version of this is don't be creepy.
Is that Facebook completely out?
Well, being an organisation that's just gone onto Facebook, no, I won't signal out Facebook. Except there are almost 1 billion people on it, so the chances of being creepy and making money out of being creepy are increasing. But, Google's got this do no evil right? It's always said do no evil. People are starting to get really worked up about what Google's doing, and that do no evil mentality or the do no evil image has really been challenged. Why? Because some of the stuff that they've done, people are starting to perceive as being creepy. You know, the Google privacy policy changes, in lots of ways it was just what any business would do. If you're a bank in New Zealand and you've got information in different business centres, wouldn't you want to link it up and make the most of it? It's effectively what Google's done with its products, and it's being very open about what it's doing. But boy, have people actually gone to town on it. We've been criticised for not doing enough to regulate Google, which is interesting with a 30-person organisation sitting in New Zealand, but there we go. We do our best. I talk to them a lot. But there is a limit as to, realistically, there's a limit as to what you can do. But this don't be creepy. My policy and technology team, I kind of wear 3 hats in the Privacy Commissioner's office, but one of them is being manager of the policy and tech team. And it's this constant mantra with us. Actually, somebody christened it creepy trousers. It's like, don't go there. When we're advising government agencies on what they should and shouldn't be doing, for example. All right, make sure information's right before you're using it. That's one of my examples of common sense. You don't want to use information that's wrong. You don't want to use bad data, so why would you bother? So this is a good example of where the privacy rule actually lines up with what you would be wanting to do anyway as a business. Keep information secure, also not rocket science. Though surprisingly difficult to do in some technical environments if you haven't built in privacy into your risk design, into your risk analysis or your design processes. Tell people what you're doing. Let people know what you hold about them. Correct it if they ask you to, and don't keep it for longer than you need it. The deletion issue and retention of data generally is a really interesting topic on the tech horizon at the moment, because there's potentially a use for anything. And you don't know what you're going to need 2 years down the track. Storage costs are going down so much, processing costs are going down so much, particularly by the time we get into cloud computing environments, that the temptation is to keep everything. Also, it takes judgment, it takes a little bit of thought, it takes a little bit of time to go, okay, so what information do we need and how long do we keep it for? It's kind of easier to go, oh yeah, whatever, stick it in the store. What is it, 90% of information that's held out there is never looked at again? It's some phenomenal figure. It's at least 80%. I think it's closer to 90% of information is just basically stored and not used. It's not looked at anymore. I would suggest to you that that's a waste. More than a waste. If you do actually end up looking at it, it's out of date. It's going to compromise your decision-making processes horrendously. Use or disclose information for the purpose for which you got it and tell people what you're doing. So that's my no surprises. So those are your basic. That's what the Act says. That's what it boils down to. Okay, so why are you listening to me at 3:30 on a Wednesday afternoon at the end of a 2-day conference? Did I draw the short straw or what? Okay, why should you care? Because, as I started out saying, the people you're dealing with care. The people who buy your products care. Yes, people sign up to Facebook. Actually, they also sign off Facebook, or they manage their privacy profile on Facebook increasingly. We did a survey, it was released in May, and it's on our website. I haven't tried to give you lots of statistics here. But, more than 80% of people are saying they seriously care what businesses are doing with their personal information. People are using social networking, but the vast majority of people have controlled their privacy settings. They're increasingly locking them down because they don't necessarily trust people to use the information they put out there, right? Or they only want to, I think, Jennifer, you had one slide, is how do you get through that, to the friends and family that you share things with, there's other people that you might choose to. How do you get to people? How do you get through those shields, the personal shields that people put up? Well, people are creating those personal shields because they care about their privacy and because they're not trusting businesses to use that information responsibly. So if you're a business that can demonstrate you're going to use that information responsibly, that might be one way to get through that personal shield. Or at least if you can't demonstrate that, you ain't going to get there. 11% of people said they regretted posting stuff on Facebook. I'm surprised it was that little. Actually, our social networking survey across the Asia-Pacific privacy authorities, we got 10,000 responses from across the Asia-Pacific. And the proportion was higher than that. We talk a lot in privacy terms about trust. If you get privacy wrong, what goes? People, if you're in a commercial environment, if you're in a competitive environment, people will switch products. And we've seen that happening. We were told by a major financial provider recently that if they got privacy wrong, they would pretty much go out of business tomorrow, and it was one of New Zealand's most serious financial businesses. So trust and damage to trust directly affects your bottom line. It can go positive or it can go negative. Which one would you like it to be? Privacy is a major supporter of customer trust and support in your business. And you don't just need to get them through the doors. Once they're there, you've got to keep them there. And if you stuff them around, they are not going to stay if you're in a competitive environment. If you're in government, of course, people might not have a choice about dealing with you. If you are an ACC client, for example, that is the only place you can go because you can't sue people anymore. Your private insurer is not going to pick everything up. You don't really have a choice about claiming. That's why the negative publicity has hit ACC so hard, because people don't have a choice about where they go. But that negative trust has really hit the headlines. Ultimately, I'm a human rights lawyer, okay? I think that people deserve a fair go. And that's why privacy protection is the law in New Zealand. And you might think, well, it's a pain and a half. Maybe we can just throw out New Zealand's privacy law. We can't, because we are part of an international community. There's more than 80 privacy commissioners around the world now. Take part in the international conference, and the regulators are increasingly starting to club together because we're working in a global environment, not just a domestic environment. Information knows no boundaries, and so we are working together increasingly. The international norm is to have privacy laws in countries. It's driven originally from the OECD, but it's also supported by organisations such as the Federal Trade Commission in the United States and so on. So privacy protection is the law, and it's not just the law here. So we can't just throw everything out, because New Zealand's economy is growingly relying on making sure that we treat personal information and the asset that is personal information correctly. Because if we get it wrong, we don't look good. If we want to run boutique call centres in New Zealand, for example, or have follow-the-sun information processing models, we're going to have privacy law. People tend to think it's really hard to get it right. It isn't. The 90%, at least, that is definitely a conservative estimate, 90% of the things that we see is just so easy to get it right. There are some tricky issues. I've said there may be. I'm hedging. There are some tricky issues. That's why I like privacy, because I'm a lawyer and I get to play with hard stuff, which is really cool. But they really are at the margins, and they depend very much on your business. Most of the time, for most businesses, privacy is not that hard. Even if you think the whole picture is too big to take in, don't look at the whole picture. Don't catastrophize. You can get certain things. You can be better than where you are now, which might be doing nothing, or it might be doing a lot. Whatever it is, wherever you're at, you can get things better with a few simple steps. So even if you're only taking a few simple steps, you're not aiming for perfection, you're aiming for being better. It's worth having a go. But Bill mentioned no silver bullet. There isn't a silver bullet here as well. There isn't a template I can give you to show you how to do something, because every single table has people from very different businesses in this room. The information that you collect will be different. The people that you're dealing with will be different. There will be different levels of sensitivity about the information. It'll may be held in different countries in the world. There will be all sorts of variations there. So there is no silver bullet, but what you do need to do is invest some time in thinking. Oops. Right. So what I suggest is that you task somebody, if you haven't already done so, that you task somebody in your, I've called it a company, any organisation, doesn't matter whether you're an NGO, whether you're a profit-making enterprise, whatever. Task somebody in your company to be in charge of doing that thinking. If you're a one-person firm, obviously, buck falls with you. You may want to seek some outside help, not necessarily from somebody that you pay. It doesn't necessarily need to be a lawyer. I'm not putting in a great plug for privacy lawyers here. Actually, there aren't that many around. There are a few. There are lots of people who say they know a lot about privacy. There are a few who do. But having a privacy officer, again, the way the Act's structured, the Act requires you to have a privacy officer. There's actually no penalty for not having one, which there possibly should be. The reason for having the privacy officer is so that you build your privacy policies, you build what you do around personal information, around what you need, how your business needs to function. It's probably only somebody within your business who will know that and who will be able to help you to get it right, to know what parts of the law really affect you. How much personal information do you actually have? It might be minimal. It might only be your staff information, your HR records, in which case you've probably got some pretty clear ideas about how to get it right anyway. There might be a whole range of other things, though. So task somebody in your company to do a bit of I'll loosely call it an audit. You know, have a look around. What information do you collect? Where's it stored? Who's got access to it? Do you know what information you have? We did some work a few years ago on privacy statements. You know, those little notices that everybody ignores and they click the whatever button. The privacy statements that various organisations were putting out, we wanted to kind of come up with a formula or something that was going to make it easier for people to draft a privacy statement and get it right. And we went a certain way towards that for a whole variety of generally resource reasons within a $3.4 million organisation, which has a variety of things to do in its life. We didn't quite finish things off, and it's one of the tasks that I've got for my team. But what we did find for the organisation, we had everything from a multinational corporation through to a charity, through to a small business and a government organisation. We trialled various things with them. What they universally found hard was that they had no idea what information they had, or why they were collecting it, or where it was being held in the organisation, or who had access to it. They didn't know. And unless you know, privacy is going to happen by accident, if it happens at all. The concept I'd like to introduce to you is privacy by design. Think about it. And the way in which you're going to do that is having somebody who is familiar with your business, who knows what you want to achieve, who knows how you're driving to get there, to say, okay, so this is the information that we've got, this is how it's going to help us do our job, or actually it's going to get in the way of doing our job because it's out of date, or it's going to get in the way of dealing with our customers properly, or what happens when you hit the front page of the New Zealand Herald because you've got something wrong. You know, so it's not just the disaster management side, it's the focusing on the getting it right, but having that disaster backup plan, like you were suggesting earlier, you know, have a plan for when things go wrong. We can advise, we've got materials on our website, obviously, but we've also got an 0800 number, and I've included that on my contact slide at the end. So feel really free just to pick up the phone and call. We get about 7,000 inquiries a year to our 2 inquiries staff. So, you know, just call. That is what we're there for. We also run training workshops. We can come to organisations if you've got a big enough group of people, then that's fine. But predominantly, we would be running workshops on our own premises. But we do them several times a year, so do come in. You don't have to rely on us. Increasingly, we're looking to make our education materials available just for you to be able to pick up and drop into what it is that you do in your organisations. But we can train. And it's useful for us to be able to train the person in your organisation who's doing the privacy thinking. Hopefully somebody that talks to the C-suite, which is my next slide. Who should be the privacy officer? Basically, there is no magic. It doesn't matter who the privacy officer is. It doesn't matter whether you actually, if you're a sole person company, you can't do everything. Right? You can't hold your tax liabilities and everything in your head. You can't run your business. grow your client base, use the social media stuff that you've been talking about, and also, be an expert on privacy law. You probably can't do that. But what you can do is probably consult your Chamber of Commerce and see who they've got available who might be able to help you. Or if you've got a particular issue about types of information that you've got, pick up the phone and call us. Maybe we've got an easy answer. Okay? So who should be the privacy officer looking outside the one-person company? It doesn't matter. The only rule is, for goodness sake, listen to them. There's no point having somebody there who's telling you that this is what you should do if you just go your own way or completely ignore them. Obviously, there's room for disagreement on certain things, or there may be a different risk appetite. So the privacy officer may say, oh, I think we've got an issue with this and this and this. The CE will go, well, yeah, okay, hear what you say, but nonetheless, we think this is the way that this should work. Perfectly valid business decision, as long as it doesn't break the law, of course. But, there's a lot of flexibility in the law. So if it's just a question of what might be best practice or what might work best for the company, then there'll be some flexibility in there. So who should be your privacy officer? It doesn't matter. What I'd suggest in the development field, and particularly if you're in the IT field, a team approach is really good. So whatever, thank you, I can see it properly now. Whatever works. It's useful, I think, if you're in IT development, to have an engineer who is your privacy officer. There might not be the natural person you go to. If you have a legal division, probably the temptation is to go to the lawyers. And, hugely useful, often, to have a legal compliance focus. But privacy is about a lot more than legal compliance. So have an engineer. The engineer is going to know how the product's developing. Probably if I'm a lawyer, okay, I don't understand how things get developed. My son is an IT professional. His world is completely different from mine. He sits and drafts things and the weirdest stuff I've ever seen. But, he can understand the aims of what it is that he's building, what he's trying to achieve. So what you do is you try and create privacy from the ground up. You think about how you're handling personal information. What are you collecting? Who's going to see it? Is it creepy? All those things. Design privacy from the ground up. The engineer can talk to the lawyer, can talk to the CFO or whoever it might be, can talk to whoever in the company needs it. You can build a team approach if you're a big enough organisation. That's fine. Having as many people that know about this stuff as possible in the company is great. Clue somebody up on admin. It's not much point everybody else knowing what's going on if the person on your reception desk is going to give out information to whoever asks for it. Right? So everybody needs to be aware. Task somebody to write the policies and handle customer queries. Those can sit in different places in your organisation, not a problem. Privacy is as much about culture and how you think about the people that you deal with, the people whose information it is. Data's not just data, personal data. It's not just bits and bytes of information, it's people. And that's why this kind of thing matters. Let's face it, we're human beings. This is where we are. Privacy lawyers, you will find, are about the nosiest people on the entire planet. Which is why I spend so much time on Facebook. I don't know how many of you here are apps developers. There's been a lot of talk about social media, so I will skip through some of this. Just a couple of things that you tend to have to watch when you're developing apps, particularly when it comes to things like mashups and public information. Publicly available information, so information on publicly available Facebook profiles, all the way around the web and so on, is basically it's available for use. There are a few rules. If you get something that is formally a public register in law, the Electoral Act is probably, or the Electoral Roll rather, is a bad example because that's locked down anyway. But things like ratings registers and births, deaths and marriages registers and so on, there is a rule in the Privacy Act that says you are not allowed to take information from one public register, combine it with information from another public register, put them together and sell it. Okay? You could make it available for free, but you're not allowed to sell it. The reason for that is that public registers are set up for various public interest purposes. There is a specific reason why this information is being made available to the public, and what you're doing by linking things up, particularly when that is for profit, is circumventing that purpose. And there is actually a rule that says you're not supposed to do that. I suspect it is rather more honoured in the breach than anything else. But this is something, if you are a developer or a company that's thinking about doing it, watch out for it. Now, the rule only covers things that are formally public registers. I've given the legal reference here, which is Schedule 2 of the Privacy Act. Basically, there is a statute that establishes a public register to do something, and that's the information you're using. It's not all publicly available information, it's only things on public registers. Another trick with mashups, it's very easy. You might have a privacy statement, you might have various privacy settings, you might be an app developer, you say, well, this is what we're doing, this is what we're using this for. What we're finding increasingly, because it's such a complex environment out there, is that privacy settings aren't necessarily working together. So you might develop an app off the back of Facebook, for example, to use the most common example. You might develop the app and find that your privacy settings don't actually work in with Facebook's privacy settings very well. Who was it? I think it was Google again, got into trouble recently for basically circumventing Safari's security settings. The two just didn't work together. That might not be a particularly good example, but we're finding it all the time in the app field. So it is something to watch for. Does your code match somebody else's code? So you're not going to be unwittingly circumventing privacy settings and capturing information that you have no idea about. It's a little bit small. Combine the information and start selling on the internet tomorrow. Have we got God, the devil, Santa Claus, direct marketing and the CIA? It ain't so far off the truth, guys. Girls Around Me is probably something that is there anybody that hasn't heard of Girls Around Me? Well, there's a few. All right, very briefly. Girls Around Me was an app that ran off Foursquare. It took information from Foursquare, the location-based site, yes, and combined it with publicly available profile information from Facebook, mashed it up, and made it available. What it did was guys were downloading this onto their phone, and they could see pretty girls aged, between whatever age they were interested in clubs near them. There was a tech journalist actually broke the story in the United States because he thought this was funny. He was kind of seeing things. He mentioned it to a couple of his girlfriends who went, oh my God, this is stalker territory. All right? So, a lot of us in this room would kind of get that, even those of you who hadn't heard about it before. You take information to publicly available sources, stick it together, and you've got a completely different product. One of the beauties of apps, that's what you do. You make the most of what's out there. It was a lovely little money-making exercise for the Russian outfit that had actually developed the app as well. But it was creepy, all right? When people realised it might have been legit in legal terms, but deeply, deeply creepy. One of the problems here was information asymmetry. The women who were putting their information online in Foursquare and putting their information online in their Facebook pages had no idea, no idea, that an item of technology could be built which would pull the two together and present it to somebody else on a phone. Thank you. They had no idea about that. So you've got these completely different expectations about what that information is going to be used for. Because as we say to people, this is what you really look like when you're surfing the net. Yeah, you know it. If it's out there, it's everywhere. You can set your privacy settings however you want, but what are your friends doing with information that you post on your pages? We all know that. Again, these 13-year-olds and primary school students we've been dealing with as well, we say, this is what basically happens. And they go, whoa. First thing we did with our youth advisory group a couple of years ago was actually to not quite cyber stalk them. We did a basic search on Google Images and various other things. They each got a sealed envelope when they came into the room. And they went, but I locked down my privacy settings. How did you find this, you government agency, you? And we go, no, it's all online. How? I locked it down. Your friends made it available. Whoa. Okay? So people don't realise there's a huge, and where I started out was, people will make use of the technologies because it gives them something. Free tools. It gives them an ability to communicate with people on the other side of the world. It gives them the ability to discuss things they're interested in, keep in touch with friends and family, slag people off, whatever it is that they're motivated to do. It gives them the opportunity to do that, but they have no idea. The information asymmetry is enormous out there, but people are starting to cotton onto it. I won't particularly deal with scene tap. It's a thing. You go into a nightclub that scans your face, and all it picks up it's actually not personal information at all. Where I started was, is it information about an identifiable person? Scene tap actually isn't. What it does is say, we've got, you're a 25-year-old guy who's just walked into this nightclub. So it can tell how, rough age, and it'll pick up your gender, usually. It's not 100%. So it's facial analysis, not facial recognition technology. So it'll pick up, 80% of the people in this particular club are guys. Oh, cool, I don't think I'll, or I think I might go there then, I might get lucky tonight. If you want to improve your chances, use the app. But it's very popular in the United States and it's coming in Australia. I don't know it's in use in New Zealand yet. But again, it's had some privacy advocates really up in arms, and you'd go, well, why? Because it doesn't capture their faces. It's only analysis. All it does is deliver statistics to you. So at a privacy compliance level, it isn't a problem. But what it does do is, off the back of that, it would be so easy then to link it to publicly available information, from Facebook pages to if the technology were to change, you only need to change the coding a very little bit, and it will do something quite different. And that's what we call function creep. You start here, it's not a problem. You move to here, it's starting to look a bit more iffy. It's so easy to build on the add-on that is going to be a problem. And that's the issue with scene tap. It's not where it's at now, it's about what it could do if you changed it just a little bit. I've already referred to information being everywhere in the world, and that's why we need to have standardised rules so that businesses, it doesn't matter where they're operating, they know how to operate. So it reduces their compliance costs. It doesn't matter whether you're in New Zealand, whether you're in Australia, you should be operating under pretty much the same privacy principles, and that's actually what happens. I've said your app, but it could be your social media, your business, whatever, it's your responsibility. It doesn't matter where in the world your information is, it's your responsibility. If you hold it, you're in control of it. It doesn't matter whether you've stored it on a server in Singapore, whether it's in Buenos Aires, whether it's in Washington, D.C., it's still your responsibility. So make sure that you know what you're signing up for. And in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to go out with our cloud computing guidance for small to medium enterprises, which gives the sort of some ideas about the questions to ask of cloud vendors. Keep some control. Usually those contracts are take it or leave it. Fine, but you've probably got a choice of providers, so at least ask some basic questions, because if the proverbial hits the fan, you're the one that's going to be on the front page of the New Zealand Herald. Personal information as an asset, again. I'll leave you probably with this slide. People rely a lot on consent. Oh, people have signed up, they agree to the terms and conditions. Yeah, right. How many people have actually read privacy policies of things they click through to? A smattering? Word for word? End to end? Yeah, I tend to as well, but, that's me. It's partly from academic interest as much as anything else, because I want to find out what other people are saying. But, okay, the majority of people did not put their hands up. The majority of the 13-year-olds I was speaking to the other day also didn't put their hands up. There were a few things. I suggested that you look for particular things. So if you care about who gets your information, look for who do you disclose it to. If nothing else, go and look for that. If you're worried about security, look for the information that relates to that. Pick out the bits of information that you want. The reality is that most so-called privacy statements are not privacy statements at all. They are legal disclaimers. You know, I am protecting my arse here. If something goes wrong, I am not going to be liable. Doesn't matter. So is this disclaimer, 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 disclaimer. No, by the way, this is what we do with your personal information and you're agreeing to it. Okay? And it's longer than the United States Constitution and it's completely in legalese. Not good enough. We're actually starting to crack down. So those of you who are writing privacy policies, just think about how you're engaging with your audience. When is consent really going to be consent? Actually, the Privacy Act uses the term authorisation, which is a bit tougher than consent. It isn't, you cannot claim that your client has authorised something if your privacy statement is incomprehensible. You cannot claim they're consenting to stuff if you can't find it because it's in tiny type 3 pages deep on your website. Not good enough. All right? And if it's too vague, we can do anything we like. That's not information, all right? It's not helpful. It's absolutely not good for your brand. I'll leave it here because we're out of time, but I've got some tips on security and breach notification. We've actually got guidelines for when things go wrong because they do, because people make mistakes. They will email a spreadsheet by mistake out of an organisation. How do you deal with it when that happens? A third-party IT provider may let you down. How do you deal with it? We've got some guidelines. Minimise the amount of data that you get. It's probably not so much of a problem for apps because you do have a specific purpose, but over-collection is a real problem and over-retention is a problem too. So do think about it. I have dropped on each of the tables these, which is a resource that you can take away, share around, grab any spare copies if you like it. We call it Padlock. It's protecting personal information. If you do nothing else, work through the checklist. You know, what purpose are you getting it for? Is it accurate? Data minimisation, life cycle, and so on. So take a few of these away, stick them on your walls. Hopefully you'll find it useful. If you think of no other rules, even if you never read the Privacy Act, at least think about that.